Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome back to your fourth stimulus survival check and stimulus package update. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says more stimulus checks are coming. We'll get to that in just a minute, but last week, the House passed its sweeping annual defense policy bill that would add billions of dollars to President Biden's defense budget proposal. Afterwards, White House reporter Jeff Stein tweeted, "House, by an overwhelming bipartisan margin, approved a $778 billion military budget. That roughly translates to $8 trillion over 10 years, or, put another way, more than double the cost of the Biden safety net and climate package of $3.5 trillion over a decade. In addition, Joe Biden is sending $100 billion to developing nations around the world to fight climate change. How many stimulus checks could there be with $100 billion?
$100 billion.
Washington Post economics correspondent Heather Long tweeted, "Fourth stimulus check is still one of the most searched topics on Google. That's how popular they were. The third stimulus payments went out about 6 months ago. There are no plans for a fourth check, though some see the expanded child tax credit as a version of the stimulus checks. With only 17% of federal rent aid actually being dispersed by the Treasury Department, Universal Basic Income advocate Scott Santon said, "We should have just done monthly stimulus checks from the very beginning." When asked if Congress is considering including a fourth stimulus payment in their $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill, Nancy Pelosi said the child tax credits are the stimulus checks.
Are you considering a fourth stimulus check, another stimulus check to be added to reconciliation to address?
To what? To add it to what?
Another stimulus check.
Well, we have a stimulus check will go out on the 15th. The child tax credit will go out on the 15th of October. We just had the September check. Yeah.
As you just heard, Nancy Pelosi called the child tax credits stimulus checks, basically putting an end to the idea of any more rounds of checks as we know. Meanwhile, nearly 3 million people have signed the Change.org petition demanding Congress for more aid. Moving over to another issue, here's Joe Biden back in 2007 sharing his plan on securing the border.
Ladies and gentlemen, no great country can say it is secure without being able to control its borders. Period. What I would do about it, what I proposed to do about it almost 13 years ago. I would radically ramp up the number of border security guards we have, the use of electronic surveillance material we have to guard the border, and the number of what they call virtual fences. They're not literally fences. Virtual fences from aerostat balloons on to whereby we can control the border. Much, much better.
Secretary Mayorkas said the Biden administration opposes the wall because people crossing illegally is one of our proudest traditions.
Why did you allow them in the country in the first place? Why didn't you build, forgive me, a wall or a fence to stop them from walking in this flood of people coming across the dam? It looks like a highway that allows them to cross the Rio Grande.
It is the policy of this administration. We do not agree with the building of the wall. The law provides that individuals can make a claim for humanitarian relief. That is actually one of our proudest traditions.
Let's take a look at Kamala immigration.
People who are fleeing murder capitals of the world. There are children who are fleeing murder capitals of the world, who have fled, most of them, murder capitals of the world. We have families that are fleeing murder capitals of the world. A mother who pays imagine a mother who makes a decision to pay when a mother pays often through a caravan with a coyote to transport her child through their country of origin, through the entire country of Mexico, of traveling through the entire country of Mexico, to transport her child across the entire country of Mexico, through the entire country of Mexico. It was safer for them to take that trek through Mexico, facing unknown peril, facing unknown peril, facing unknown peril, in what they know could be a perilous journey. We have always presented ourselves as being a nation of strength with strong arms, the strong arms of America. Part of the strength of our nation is supposed to be that we have strong arms. That when people are fleeing harm, we will embrace them. Which will embrace and protect fleeing or facing harm, should be here to receive anyone who is fleeing harm. I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. But what does Donald Trump do? But what does this president do? He virtually looks at those children and says, go back to where you came from. Not to flick them away and say, go back to where you came from. And that's the kind of policy we've had from this administration. He says, go back to where you came from. That is not reflective of our America and our values, and it's got to end. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back.
Marjorie Taylor Greene complained about being told she could not motion to adjourn before the prayer and pledge.
You see, this government is failing the American people, and the more votes we take this week are going to continue to fail the American people. And this is why I walked in here this morning to make a motion to adjourn, but then I was told I couldn't make a motion to adjourn because we hadn't said the prayer of the pledge. It's very unfortunate. We should make a motion to adjourn because Congress should stop. Congress is the one ruining the lives of the American people, not helping them like they claim to do. Currently, we are at $28,809,752,000,000, and the numbers are rising so fast I couldn't name them all. But it's continuing to rise, yet we are considering a budget this week at $4.3 trillion, which would be the most expensive piece of legislation in United States history, which is mind-boggling, especially considering the fact that we also are looking at voting on a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that is mostly socialism, giving things away for free and wasting the taxpayers' dollars.
Representative Ro Khanna said everyone's looking at 2 senators and 8 House members who are holding everything up.
Well, here's the situation. You have about 48 senators out of 50 who are for the president's agenda. You have about 210 members of the House who are for the president's agenda. So you're really looking at about 2 senators and 8 House members who are holding everything up. I mean, I don't think I'm very optimistic it'll happen. I think the president made a very compelling case. He's shown great leadership in saying, give them a number. I mean, I think that was his message in all of the conversations. That's his staff's message. As soon as we get a number, I actually think the contours of a deal are there, because a lot of the things that we want in terms of a clean energy standard and climate provisions, universal preschool, expansion of Medicare, these are very popular. And I actually think some of even the holdouts will be for it. But we have to have a number, and that's what the president keeps emphasizing. And they'll find a reasonable party on the progressive side.
Roe tweeted, "Let's be clear, there's no passing the infrastructure bill without passing the Build Back Better Act." So Nancy Pelosi delayed the vote on Joe Biden's $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill until September 30th. Pelosi promised to vote on the bill by September 27th, which obviously has passed. So will there be a deal by Thursday? Here's reporter Manu Raju and what one of those 2 people, Joe Manchin, had to say.
Progressives in the House are demanding is that at the very least, people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema sign on to principles, an outline, a framework of the larger social safety net plan, some of the details, the top line number. And what Joe Manchin made clear today is that the goal to get this all resolved by Thursday, in his view, is a, quote, heavy lift.
That's a heavy lift. There's a lot to do, a lot to talk about, but everybody has to keep trying to work in good faith the best you can. There's a lot in that bill, the 3.5, the reconciliation bill, tax codes, climate change, social reforms. There's a lot, and people need to know what's in it.
So this is why this is significant, Allison, is because Pelosi has scheduled that vote on Thursday on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. But progressives, I'm told 40 or more, could vote against that plan if Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, other moderates, don't sign off on that larger framework agreement. What does that bill look like? What does that look? Does that have the support of those key members? If it does not, then it's possible the leadership could be forced to punt on that issue again. And Thursday is significant because come Friday is the expiration of key funding programs, transportation funding programs, which is why Pelosi is putting that vote on Thursday to pressure some of the progressives to vote for it or risk seeing that funding lapse. And also, you mentioned it too, Allison, they need to keep the government open past Thursday, and it's unclear how that gets resolved as Republicans are voting to kill it over the increase of the debt ceiling that's included in that.
Okay, well, thanks for that 3-day headache.
When asked about Senate Democrats opposing the $3.5 trillion price tag of the reconciliation bill, here was Speaker Pelosi's response.
The holdouts in the Senate, of course, everyone knows Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, at least those two. Joe Manchin says $3.5 trillion is way too much and it doesn't necessarily have to pass this year. Kyrsten Sinema says she's not going to support any increases in income taxes or corporate taxes. Have you made progress on those issues? It doesn't sound like it.
Well, Chuck Schumer and I and Secretary Yellen the other day came forward in a press event and said that we had reached a framework of agreement. And people said, well, what are the specific? Well, we'll see what we need. We'll see how the number comes down and what we need in that regard. But we have agreed on an array of pay-fors in the legislation. This will be paid for. So when some say, oh, well, what about inflation? It will be paid for. And that's the beauty of it, by having those in our economy and society who have not paid their fair share, paying their fair share. So again, the Senate and the House, those who are not in full agreement with the president's rate, let's see what our value, let's not talk about numbers and dollars, let's talk about values. And the values are about...
Is the solution to paying for it a carbon tax?
There's an array of issues that are there. I'm not going to be, let's see what we need to have. And there are those who have suggested that. So when I say we're ready, we've investigated, or shall we say, documented everything that we need to be ready with legislative language to go forward. And I'm very excited about the hard work that everybody did. We stayed on schedule. They said you couldn't do it by September 15th. We did. We have our budget committee yesterday taking the work of the committees and putting it forward. We've been carefully trying to see what could be birdable. You know, in the House, I'm used to negotiating with the White House or among ourselves and with the Senate, but to negotiate we don't negotiate with the parliamentarian. She will make judgments about something that might violate the bird rule or provisions of privilege, whatever that is. And that's a bath that legislation has to take. So all of these things are in place. We're trying to get them be as ready as possible. We are ready on our side. We just have to see how quickly the parliamentarian can operate.
Here now is what Josh Gottheimer had to say about the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
There's so much in this historic once-in-a-century package, and it's been sitting there, Jake, waiting for our consideration, waiting for us to vote on it since early August. I can't explain to anybody why we have this separate bill sitting here, and you've got all these hardworking men and women ready to go to work here on labor, ready to go to work and get this done, and we haven't voted on it. So that's why I know we have to get it done, and we will, and we also have to get reconciliation done, and that's also going to get done.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package will cost $0.
There's not disagreement about the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve. And there is agreement that we need to address the climate crisis, that we need to cut costs for childcare, for college, that we need to make it easier for women to rejoin the workforce. We need to rebuild and modernize our infrastructure. So there's agreement on that. There's a basic discussion that needs to happen, or is ongoing. We're right in the weeds of it now on what the size of the package looks like. But I will also note, and we've done this a little bit over the past couple of days, but that this package, the reconciliation package, would cost $0. So what I'm saying, the case we're making here is that there needs to be agreement on the different components. There's broad agreement on the goals. And then there needs to be agreement on what the revenue pay-fors are.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal echoed the same message.
Do you think it's possible that the price tag will come down? I've heard the number $2 trillion floated as a possible endpoint.
I think we should look, first of all, as I said to the president, I heard him say, this is a $0 bill because it's all going to be paid for with taxes on the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest individuals, which, by the way, makes it more popular than it was even before, and it's already very popular. But ultimately, I think it depends on what we put in there. We put our proposal out. It cost $3.5 trillion when you add everything up.
Right.
But if somebody wants to take something out, we need to hear what that is. I don't know what the alternative proposal is, so it's difficult for me to say.
Catherine Rampel of the Washington Post went on air to break down what's happening with the bill.
So there are so many things, but I think my number one priority would be more discussion of what's actually in the bill, as opposed to this top line figure, which itself is misleading, of $3.5 trillion. There are good ways to spend a huge sum of money. There are are bad ways to spend a huge sum of money, but the kind of media coverage that we've been getting doesn't really explore whether the kinds of things that are in this bill are meritorious or not. I'd love to see more people commenting about, should we invest in childcare this way or paid leave that way or in climate? Instead, It's about the number.
And why is the number misleading? Why is that 3.5 trillion?
Because it doesn't really represent anything. It's this weird shorthand that's been used, but in fact, the bill itself will not cost $3.5 trillion in the sense that it will be entirely or at least partly paid for. So the actual cost in terms of deficits will be smaller than that, perhaps even zero, although I think that's unlikely. And it's not even, fully spending. It's not really right to call it a $3.5 trillion spending bill because there's probably about $1 trillion of tax cuts in it too. So it's really hard to boil down the essence of what this legislation is because it does so many things and because they're still negotiating over the basic parameters. They have to cram everything into this one major piece of legislation, the so-called reconciliation bill, whatever shorthand we use for it. And so it has to cover all of the bases, or at least everything that can ostensibly get pushed into a budget bill. They have to do climate, they have to do paid leave, they have to do child care, they have to do, green energy tax credits for cars and things like that. They have to put everything into this one piece of legislation because they can't do piecemeal, regular order bills because the Senate doesn't function that way anymore.
Mitch McConnell spoke from the floor to say that they will not provide Republican votes for raising the debt limit. Mitch says Republicans will block the stopgap funding bill, which could leave the GOP to blame for a $28 trillion default.
For more than 2 months now, Senate Republicans have been completely clear about how this process will play out. So let me make it abundantly clear one more time. We will support a clean, continuing resolution that will prevent a government shutdown, get disaster relief to Louisiana, help properly vetted Afghan refugees who put themselves on the line for America, and support the Iron Dome assistance for our ally, Israel. We will not provide Republican votes for raising the debt limit.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also spoke, and here's what he had to say.
After today, there will be no doubt about which party in this chamber is working to solve the problems that face our country and which party is accelerating us towards unnecessary, avoidable disaster. At the end of last week, I filed cloture on proceeding to the continuing resolution sent to us by the House of Representatives, which, among other things, would prevent a government shutdown and suspend the debt limit so we can pay for our debts incurred during the previous administration. In a few hours, we will vote on cloture on the motion to proceed to this bill. The Democrats will do the responsible thing, the right thing, the thing that's been done for decades by both parties, and vote yes. Now, if Republicans follow through with their plans to vote no, they will be on record deliberately sabotaging our country's ability to pay the bills and likely causing the first ever default in American history. The consequences of a default would be, in the words of Secretary Yellen, catastrophic. The best case scenario is, the best case under this awful situation, is that our country would fall into another recession, potentially erasing all the progress we have made to pull ourselves out of the crisis. That is, if otherwise, one analysis warned that default could hurt Americans for generations.
In other news, President Biden joked with the press ahead of getting his booster shot live on camera.
Did you ever think you'd be senior press coming to watch someone get a shot in the old days? Me either. Anyway,
Joe Biden says there are going to be $1.1 billion.
We are helping, we're doing more than every other nation in the world combined. We're going to have well over $1.1 billion shots, and we're going to continue going.
Joseph acknowledged that his economic agenda may not pass this week, but he still remains optimistic.
On a reconciliation deal, how close do you think you are?
You know me, I'm more an optimist. I think things are going to go well. I think we're going to get it done. And I have meetings tonight, tomorrow, and for the next little bit. Well, it may not be by the end of the week. I hope it's by the end of the week. But as long as we're still alive, we got 3 things to do: the debt ceiling, continuing resolution, and the 2 pieces of legislation. If we do that, the country's going to be in great shape.
Biden also said if only one bill comes back to him, he will not sign it.
I can do it. If they don't come, I'm not signing. So what I expect that in the coming months this summer, before the fiscal year is over, that we will have voted on this bill, as well, the infrastructure bill, as well as voted on the budget resolution. And that's when but if only one comes to me, if this is the only thing that comes to me, I'm not signing it.
Meanwhile, Canada's Chief Medical Officer of Health certainly has people talking.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming today. And I will now turn the podium over to Minister LaGrange.